You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 339 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
I'm staying warm. That's the least I can say.
Again, we mentioned it's cold, which means it's the beginning of the baseball season, and we have baseball to talk about. Hosts only this week. We had our big season preview and predictions episode last week with Evan Altman. This week we wanted to talk about the home opener, a little bit about the home series, with the weather being as unpredictable as it's going to be for the Wednesday game here. We figured let's do a podcast today, talk about the opening series a little bit, talk about the home opener, and then we'll get back on our regular cadence starting next week, and our whole list of fun guests we'll have plugged in as well. So let's dig into the big news coming out of the opening series. Cubs dropped 2 of 3 in Texas. The big news being the opening game of the season. Justin Steele goes down with a hamstring injury.
Couldn't be any worse, could it? The first game.
We were just talking about this, Pat.
Yeah. My impassioned plea to sign Jordan Montgomery was predicated on the fact that the one thing the Cubs could not do was lose one of their top starting pitchers, i.e. the only top starting pitcher they have really at this point, which is Justin Steele, and that in doing so, they ran the risk of fumbling away potentially in the long run the division if things went poorly. And sure enough, game 1 we saw, although maybe not the absolute worst case scenario, certainly a very bad scenario with Justin Steele.
No, especially so early, and I'm already upset because I'm dealing with the ESPN crew, and I'm having to listen to this broadcast, but I'm excited that baseball's here, and to see Justin Steele go down, I immediately texted you. I'm like, we just had this conversation. We just talked about this on the prediction show. We wished they had gone for some additional depth, because you take a Justin Steele out of this lineup, even for the month that it looks like he's going to be out, and it's tough.
Yeah, it certainly is. And that first game was just sort of all things bad combined, I think. We saw not just the injury to Justin Steele, and it looks like he's going to be out for at least a month, but we also, unfortunately, had to witness the Cubs taking the lead 3 times, only to blow the lead 3 times, generally right after they took it, and Steele not being able to finish the 5th because of the injury led to the Cubs having to go to the bullpen, where they ended up using 6 pitchers. Alzolay gives up a home run to someone who has, I won't say he's never hit a home run, but good God, he almost has never hit a home run, blowing the save in the 9th. And then good old Drew Smiley came on in the 10th to cap it off for the Cubs and almost got out of it, but didn't. And the Cubs lost a tough game. Just frustrating all the way around. It was just a sour taste in the mouth kind of game, really.
And that's one of those games, playing, that was your chance to surprise Texas, because those teams on the opening night after winning a championship, you a lot of times they come out flat. A lot of times
we witnessed that ourselves here in 2017 with the Cubs. Several
very much
ring ceremony and championship game. They dragged it out over a weekend. It was torture because every time they did, we lost.
But with that, they did end up losing the next game. We had the weird off Friday. They lost the second game of the season, 2 in a row here for the Cubs, losing 11-2. This was, you never felt good about this one.
No, and in fact, I thought the second game of the year was worse than the first game, apart from the injuries, I guess. the Cubs started to show this sign, and it's early, so I'm not going to make a big deal of it so far. But not great defensively so far this year. We've seen Horner with an error and Swanson, although one of Swanson's seemingly one of his errors was reversed, but just not great defense. We've seen Christopher Morel, who has been great at the plate, but a butcher in the field so far at third base. That's looking not so wonderful. And even Bush at first, although without committing an error, had an opportunity on a throw to scoop up a ball and make an out that probably most Cubs first basemen in the last 30 years would have done, but he did not, costing, I think it was Horner, got charged with an error because of that. So there's some of that stuff going on, and just a little bit sloppy, in addition to the fact that Kyle Hendricks got smashed around pretty well. I know we all like Kyle Hendricks a great deal. He's been a stalwart in the Cubs rotation now for a decade, and we have fond feelings for him, as you know from listening to the podcast and from being part of the recording of it. I've been a little bit skeptical of the likelihood that he would come back this year with as good a season as he had last year. When you look at the $14.5 million or whatever they paid him to pick up his option, had they only known Montgomery would be available on a one-year deal for 25, that might have changed their perspective. But of course, they didn't at the time. Realized that all other teams would be as cheap as they were, and then allow for that. But I do worry about Hendricks. I'm sure he can bounce back. Might have made sense to have him start the first game at home like he did last year against the Brewers, and a couple of years before that against the Brewers, where those cold, wintry conditions he seems to thrive with the Cubs. But not a good game for him. Really got hit around quite a bit. And then we got to see Ben Brown, who many people were very high on, who came to the rescue when Steele went on the IL. People were hoping that he would take over a rotation spot and fit right in. And again, with rookies, it's always tricky, and he really did get roughed up quite a bit himself. So it was just, anytime you lose 11-2, it's bad. Blowouts are blowouts, but the way it went down was not particularly great. And the Cubs started off 0-2, and things seemed pretty bad. There was a lot of grousing, I think, in social media from people early in the season, though it was. People kind of overreacted early games like that.
But I think the hope was to see the Cubs at least get one.
Yes.
If they won 2 out of 3, great, overachieving. But I think if you got out of there with one, that was to be expected against the defending champion.
And that's why opening day was so frustrating, because even with losing Steele, that was a chance to steal a game and maybe win 2 out of 3. But of course, when that didn't happen, it was really the getaway day, I guess, on Sunday was pivotal. And the Cubs had our own, yet another young pitcher, our own Jordan Wicks, who pitched that game. And, the Cubs managed to give up a bunch of runs, but score a bunch of runs. And it was pretty even. Wicks only made it 4 innings, gave up 5 runs, although only a couple of them were earned because, again, the defense wasn't so hot. But then the Cubs came back in the 9th inning, and got to watch that with the family on Easter Sunday. And it was nice to see the Cubs rally and score not just a run, because as soon as they scored a run, we thought, okay, well, now it's 6-5, but that's not nearly enough, as we know. So when they got 2 more runs and then another run on top of that, I felt much, much better. So 9-5 win.
Yeah, it was great to see. I think, so finally seeing some of the Cubs offense click and perform where you hope to see it was very encouraging. But I think pitching-wise, the story of the series, the surprise for me was how great Neris looked. Every time he came in, he was lights out and exactly what the Cubs needed in those situations.
He spent a lot of time playing the Rangers when he was an Astro. So Alzolay looked really good, too, in that game. It was important, striking out a couple of really good hitters, Jong and Garcia, and going 1-2-3, which was a nice kind of, after that first game when he gave up the home run, it was nice for him to get back in the saddle and get a clean save like that to rebuild his confidence a little bit. He was so good last year. It was nice to see him recapture some of that glory.
And then
Also,
the
it was nice
Cubs.
to see Ian Happ do well.
Yes,
And
got a
Suzuki was,
big hits.
yeah. So all in all, I mean, when you win 9-5, usually you're pretty happy, and I think that was fair to say. Merriweather pitched not one but two innings, and I'm interested to see how Council is going to use the bullpen this year, not just in terms of the number of pitchers he uses, but also in how he utilizes them. And I have long been a proponent of the 2 inning relief appearance rather than the David Ross one, as I call it. And when you can get that out of a relief pitcher, it goes a long way. We talked about that last year at the beginning of the year when the Cubs had a bunch of guys who seemed like they were sort of starter swing men, relief pitchers like Wisniewski and people like that, and the thought was, well, they'll pitch like 2 innings out of relief or 3 innings. And it didn't usually work out that way, but I would be encouraged if in fact that is what happens this season.
The Cubs came home to open their have their Cubs home opener against the Colorado Rockies. You can't ask for a better opponent to play to start the season. If not the White Sox, thank goodness it's the Colorado Rockies.
Talk about getting healthy. No better team to do it against.
That's right. And Pat, you were in attendance. It looked cold. I did not go. I was out of town for spring break, so I was unable to attend. But you were there. Looked cold.
Was cold.
I can say that the reports I was getting from friends and family in attendance were that secondary ticket prices were the lowest that some people have ever seen for a Cubs opening day.
Absolutely, they were. Prices were low. There was a threat of rain, which I think helped reduce the prices in addition to just cold weather. Fortunately for us, Imanaga pitched quite effectively and it was a dominating effort. And the game went pretty quickly. It was a fast-moving game, so that by the time the rain did come, we were in the 7th inning already. I mean, the goal in this game was to play 5 with the lead, basically, is what I said, because after that, it was anybody's guess. They ended up getting the whole game in, which was a miracle. Had this been the pre-pitch clock era, I imagine that we might have been in some perpetual rain delay after the 8th inning for the rest of the night, because once it started raining, it didn't stop for quite some time. But yeah, that was really the story of the game. 6 innings, give up no hits for the first 5 2/3, which is great. I think that's the longest by a Cub I saw since Amori Telemaku, his debut. So you're going back on that one, and again, like you said, with the Rockies in the field, Morel can hit a base hit into left field. The left fielder can let the ball go under his glove all the way to the wall. He can throw it to the cutoff man, whose glove it can bounce off of into the grasp of another. I think it was the third baseman's glove bounced off to the shortstop. The shortstop then can immediately relay home and miss home plate by about 90 feet up the line. I think he almost threw it to first base. I don't know what that was one of the worst relay throws I've ever seen in my life. And Morel got what we like to refer to as a Little League home run. It was a single and 3 errors, basically. But he scored and drove in 2 runs along with it, although he didn't probably get credit for driving them in. But when that happened in the 6th inning and the Cubs went up 3-0, I knew we were in business, because it did not feel as if the Cubs were going to give up many runs that game, unless they were to hit the ball directly at Morel. That's a whole other story. He had another rough day in the field, but the Cubs took the lead, and then they added to it in the 7th, and that was basically the story of the game. It was actually kind of an uneventful ending, and much to the earlier point I made about using relievers for multiple innings, in this game for the 8th and 9th, the 5-0 lead, we saw Council bring in Drew Smiley in the 8th and leave him in for the 9th, and that's, I think, fantastic. Why burn another relief pitcher when you've got a 5-run lead? Roll the dice here. He didn't throw that many pitches. I noticed the same thing with Merriweather. If you can get out of that first inning of relief with 10 or 12 pitches thrown, you might as well bring him in. 19 pitches total in 2 innings. The Rockies clearly wanted to go home fast, and the Cubs were more than accommodating.
Yeah, we covered a lot right there. Let me say, I loved the Morel celebration after the Little League home run. It looked electric.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine being there. That was that looked like just a great moment.
I think
Sure,
my tweet at that point was, "We're playing the worst team in the world. Yay!" Thumbs up 3-0. Because you really felt like it helped after playing the World Series champs, a really good hitting Rangers team for 3 games. It was nice to play the opposite, which is a White Sox like, Rockies team that has no business in Major League Baseball.
And then on the pitching side, 6 innings, 2 hits, no runs, no walks, 9 strikeouts for Shota Imanaga. He had 20 swings and misses in the game. This was quite a performance, exactly what you'd hope to see, exceeding expectations, I'd say. And then you also got Drew Smiley coming in and
6 up, 6
adding
down.
value.
Yeah.
So, no, you couldn't have asked for a better way to start this season. Just electric, great stuff from everybody involved here. This was great. I loved hearing from Imanaga saying that he chose Chelsea Dagger as his walk-up song because he went to a Blackhawks game and knew the fans would enjoy it.
Yes.
He's a meatball like the rest of us. This is great.
No, in fact, I think he said, was it when he shouted after he got out of the 6th inning? He gave up a couple of hits there with 2 outs and he got out of it. And they were like, "What did you shout?" He's like, "I don't remember, but I know I said, 'let's go.'" Because he remembers that's one of it. And that's from his opening day press conference when he said, that's one of the slogans he's going to remember. So, yeah, it was really fun. And he seems like a good guy. And it was nice to see that. I know you want to talk about on the visiting side of things. We had kind of a sad note.
Before we get there, I just want to one note about Morel. Andy Dolan, friend of the podcast, he'll be on later on this season, sent out a tweet, and I said, "Yep, that's exactly what I was worried about too." He said, "I'm sure routinely taking out your cleanup hitter out of games in the 7th inning won't come back to bite the Cubs in the ass."
Yeah. Well, if you play him at third base, that's going to be the problem. He is a very valuable bat/DH to have in the lineup. And I understand what they're doing because if he could play third base, even passably, what a huge difference.
So much value. So much value if he could do that at third.
Given the fact that they have so many better players that could use at DH than they have they could use at third, right? Like, with him as the constant, who else do you want in your lineup every day? Do you want Nick Madrigal in your lineup, or you want to bring in a Cooper or or Canario or anybody else you want, and it's just so much more flexibility having that DH spot open. But having said that, it's got to get better. I mean, the line drive that was hit at him, I thought he had caught it, and I was looking down for the line out 5 on the scorecard and looked up, and it's in the outfield. I'm like, how did that happen? I watched the replay, and I'm like, it didn't go through his mitt. He just literally didn't stab it, and it's not as if he had to reach for it. I mean, it was really hit more or less at his glove. And he's had some issues with some throws and with positioning on some ground balls. But you feel like reaction time on a line drive is something that, you really should master at this point. So we'll see how much tolerance Counsell has for that as the season progresses here.
Well, let's talk about former Cubs third baseman returning as part of the Colorado Rockies. Chris Bryant coming back to Wrigley Field here as part of the Colorado Rockies. And wow, I loved seeing I'm a big Chris Bryant fan and supporter. And so seeing the ovation, absolutely. And seeing the ovation he got from the Wrigley crowd, I was so happy for him and happy that the fans took the time to pay homage to Chris Bryant.
Yeah, I mean, when he came up in the top of the second to lead off, I stood up to cheer, and I figured there'd be some people that would. What I didn't anticipate, frankly, was that everybody in the stadium would stand up and cheer. It was a prolonged cheer, too. It was a really it was a heartfelt, long cheer, and it's not as if this is the first year that he's been gone. But he was hurt a lot last year. I don't even remember if he was healthy when the Cubs played the Rockies at Wrigley last year. But either way, I think the fans wanted to give their renewed appreciation NL Rookie of the Year, NL MVP, World Series winner, 39 homers that year in 2016. All around great player for the Cubs for 4 years or so, 5 years before injuries and other things set in. And watching everybody cheer, and he steps out of the box, and Imanaga, to his credit, jumps off the mound and does some calisthenics behind the mound to kind of give Bryant the moment, which is a classy move, I think. But part of me was kind of sad because Bryant looked sad. When he was standing there, it was sort of the ghost of what could have been, right? As he looked around a ballpark of fans that were in attendance and cheering him, I noted, I said that will be the longest standing ovation he gets this season.
It will, yeah.
Mark words, no matter what. And that's sad, right? Like just the way things worked out, the way things ended, and kind of a bitter pill. And here we are now. It's now, as we're recording this, it's now Tuesday evening. He's hitless on the season. On the Cooper fly ball tonight, he was playing right field. He was first base yesterday, Bryant, that is. He's playing right field tonight, and he just looked sort of like, I don't know. He almost looked old, but also maybe either old or just disinterested. I couldn't tell which, going back for it, letting it bounce off the wall and get by him, so it's hard for somebody like Garrett Cooper to get a triple. You really have to work at it defensively to make that a reality. But I just, he's got like 4 or 5 more years on this contract. I just don't know I don't even know if he's going to finish it out. To watch it is painful.
It is. It's one of those, I hope that, if there's some point where he gets out of there, he gets out of Colorado, goes to a situation where he can be healthy, if he's healthy and he can contribute and just have a renewed sense of having something to care about and play for. It's just got to be depressing to be in Colorado in this situation where there's just no hope. There's no hope there.
He came up in a unique situation with a team that was cresting like the Cubs were 2015 and 16. It's that kind of lightning in a bottle almost no player ever sees, right? Like the 99 wins in his rookie year and then winning the World Series for the first time in over 100 years in the second year. That just doesn't happen, right? That'll never happen to anyone, else probably for quite some time. But to go to Colorado, it's really a disconnect. And you remember that article from The Athletic that came out about a month ago. It was somewhat controversial because it did seem as if he was making a dig at the organization. I don't think he intended it necessarily that way, but he thought that they were further along than they were in terms of their prospects and in terms of development. And it was an interview done just this spring training, and basically the realization he had was that this team's going nowhere. He's stuck in hell, basically baseball hell, right? He gets paid, which is great. A lot of people like that.
Sure.
But as far as competitiveness and winning and anything else, for a guy who came up immediately in a literally like pennant race from the day he got there, it's just a different feel. And maybe it's hard to get up for that. I don't know, but the vibe is so much different.
The game 2, so Cubs won 5-0 in the home opener. Any other things to note from the home opener? People should know about here from being at the ballpark, or is it pretty much
good pitching, spotty defense? The hitting was a little bit better, especially under the conditions. Frankly, weather conditions were not great. Some clutch hitting too, which was nice to see. With guys, on base with 2 outs, and Bellinger got a big hit, drove in a couple of runs that way. It was really, it was a fun day. It was opening day, but after they scored those 3 in the 6th, it was kind of a race against time to get the hell out of there before the rain came. I think all teams were in agreement on that, and it was a nice clean win.
Game 2, the Tuesday night game against Colorado, which is, again, weird scheduling where you've got a Tuesday and Wednesday night game. Usually I'm the Wednesday day game after the home opener kind of guy. I love that game, but no, these are night games. And here the Cubs, at the time of this recording, we saw Suzuki start the scoring with a home run tonight. Great to see that.
A home run to center field, 115 miles an hour.
Yes, Sahadev Sharma, friend of the podcast, with a tweet that said, according to the StatCast data, Seiya Suzuki has put 17 balls in play this season. 11 have been at 95 miles per hour or higher. And his first inning home run tonight rocketed at 115 miles per hour, the hardest hit ball of his major league career. So
consistent with our preseason predictions for him and Christopher Morel. They were both off to a good start offensively.
That's right. Morel also homering in this game tonight, playing DH this time, Madrigal at third for the second game of the season.
Madrigal having the game of a life. He's 2 for 3 with 3 runs batted in already, so and a stolen base to boot. And one of his hits was a double, not a single. So
it's incredible.
Yeah, Morel hit a monster home run tonight as well. He's really hitting the ball well. And, it's early yet. It's still the bottom of the 5th, but it's an official game. Cubs are up 7-0 so far. And I think the takeaway from today, besides the brutal weather, which will only get worse tomorrow, and to your point about the scheduling, it makes it really hard to podcast when you've got night games every night, which is why we're doing it tonight, because I'll be at the game tomorrow night. Otherwise, we would have done it then. But we might end up having to move that game to Thursday if the snow and the rain and the cold tomorrow persist, but it's a tricky first week here. Makes you almost think that teams in the north who don't have dome stadiums should just play the whole first week on the road, but that's another conversation. Today, the big story, I think, is Javier Assad, right? Who is the Cubs? Well, who knows? Was he the 4th starter, the 5th starter? Hard to say, but maybe he's the 3rd starter now. He's there. And he's pitched well albeit against the Rockies, who are not a good hitting team, but 5 scoreless innings. That's exactly what the Cubs needed today to kind of help out after having to use their bullpen a lot lately and not having a starting pitcher for tomorrow necessarily. Not sure what they're going to do. Hopefully the game will be snowed out so that they can play on Thursday and then just default to the number 2 in the rotation, but right now maybe they'll call Wisniewski. Beats me. Brown pitched in game 2, so because of the way that the first week worked with game, off day, game, nobody else is really ready to pitch tomorrow, I don't think so.
At the time of this recording, still listed as TBD for tomorrow's Cubs starter, so I would still hammer the line for TBD to be victorious against these Colorado Rockies.
No kidding.
This team is terrible. But yeah, great way to start. So again, it's early. We're going to be talking about this the entire month of April. We're going to be hammering that the beating the drum of sample size and reminding folks not to get too excited. That enjoy the offensive output. Beating bad teams is what good teams do. So that's a great sign.
By the way, can I just point out, Boog and JD were talking at the beginning of the game. Kyle Freeland was the starter for the Rockies. And he had a rough start in the first game out, but he said he was overthrowing. He was a little too amped up. Ergo, 2.1 innings, 10 earned runs. And I think they were right, because today he was so much better. He pitched 3 1/3 innings and only gave up 7 earned runs.
Yeah, less amped.
Yes, less amped. At the rate he's going, takes a couple sedatives, he might get his ERA closer to 5. But I thought that was funny.
So we'll look ahead to the upcoming matchups in just a second. I did want to call out a little bit of the other things going on around baseball, especially within the jersey situation. We talk about the horrible Fanatics jerseys. I thought it was pretty telling. These gray road jerseys are just collecting player sweat and are That is not what good material should be doing. And these images that people were sharing online just looks terrible. These just the jerseys from Fanatics keep getting worse and worse somehow. This is unbelievable.
They really do look like the kind of uniforms you would get for some sort of rec league or something. Like I played on softball teams with better uniforms.
And the Cardinals and Mariners, who wear a third jersey for their Sunday games, both had to report that the jerseys were not in stock yet. They had not received the jersey. Fanatics has one job: make jerseys for Major League Baseball and have them for the start of the season. And two teams reporting that they could not get their jerseys at the start of the season. That's completely. I'm looking at this, and in the hockey Twitterverse is talking about how Major League Baseball has a lot more power than the NHL, and Major League Baseball
with those intricate sweaters they wear. That's gonna be a real. I can only imagine.
That's the key. Starting next season, these same Fanatics folks have the NHL contract to make intricate jerseys. And I don't know if you know this about hockey sweaters, but fans and players take them very seriously. And so this is going to be a disaster of epic proportions, because if MLB can't fix this, NHL stands no chance.
Yeah. I don't know when Fanatics received the contract for this. Was it St. Patrick's Day or was it before that?
No. Oh, they had some lead time. And the start of the season didn't sneak up on anybody. It was on the calendar,
maybe or so, right? Yeah,
yeah, on the calendar.
I could see having difficulty making enough duplicate jerseys to sell at stores. Like maybe you can only sell them at the team stores or at the stadium and some retail outlets, but maybe you can't make every Sears or Toys R Us or whatever other places you want to go to. But when you can't actually make enough uniforms for the players themselves, it strikes me as a bit of a problem.
Some teams went to wearing the pants from last year instead of the see-through pants that they have to wear this year. So it's completely insane that this is happening into the season now. We were laughing about it in spring training. Here we are into the season. It's still happening.
I'm surprised Manfred doesn't consider that a uniform violation and suspend the players.
So let's take a look ahead for the week that will be, and then we'll call it a podcast. We'll wrap it up. Looking ahead, one more game against Colorado, either Wednesday or Thursday, pending weather. And then the Dodgers come to town. Boy, you want to talk about getting the bends from playing a team that's no good to a team who's very stacked and very good. At least you're playing the Dodgers when it's cold and it's early in the season.
That's right. That's probably the best time to do it. The Cubs have a really interesting stretch coming up because we talked about starting off against the Rangers, and we were hopeful they could win 2 out of 3 by winning the first game with the championship ceremony, then winning one of the next 2. They almost did, not quite, but they could make up for that by sweeping the pathetic Rockies, and then they'll be in good shape. They'll be 4-2. The next 10 days, though, weekend, they've got the Dodgers at home, and then they travel out west to the Padres in Seattle. They eventually go to Arizona, but we don't get too far ahead of ourselves. But to the Padres and then to Seattle. This will be a really interesting stretch, I think, early in the year. Now you're playing it without Steele, which is could really come back to haunt them. But you're playing teams that I think, the Dodgers are certainly very good. I think the Padres are a better team than they played last year, and I think that looking at their rotation for this series, I think they'll be competitive. We're going to face Musgrove, Cease, and Darvish. So, there's some good pitchers there.
That's
and then the Cubs play Seattle, another team that's kind of sneaky decent. And how the Cubs do in these next 9 games, I think will go a long way towards seeing how big of a hole they either have to pull themselves out of, or conversely, how much if they can do well in those 9 games, I'll have to revise my expectations on the season. If they could do that without Steele, 5-4, 6-3, something like that, that will indicate to me that the Cubs are in really, really good shape vis-a-vis the rest of the division moving forward, because this is a very difficult stretch.
So we'll do a light prediction here. We'll save our road trip predictions for the next podcast. But let's talk about the rest of the homestand. One more Colorado game, 3 against LA. What do you do with these next 4 games? What do you see the Cubs doing?
4-2 overall for the week.
Overall, yes, for the week. Okay,
you're 2-0 right now. So
yes, okay.
Oh, no, not 2-0 technically yet, but they will hopefully be 2-0 after tonight.
Yes, we'll break in with an emergency podcast if they blew the lead that they have currently against Colorado. So assuming that they won the first 2 games, you feel they'll go 4-2. I also believe that they can win the next game against Colorado, and they will take 1 of 2 against the Dodgers as well. You could always be pleasantly surprised, but man, that lineup is tough, and it's gonna be hard to see them be able to do that without Justin Steele. I don't think I think 1-2 seems realistic against those Dodgers.
One of the things I like to do early in the season, as I kind of get a feel for different teams and what's going on, is I like to look at the box scores pretty carefully. Not because that they're the end-all be-all, but just it's representative of a lot of other things. And when I've been watching the Dodgers box scores, I mean, the Dodgers are 5-2 right now, but when I look at their box scores, it really is. I mean, this is a tough lineup. I mean, you've got Mookie Betts and then Ohtani and then Freeman and then Teoscar Hernandez, and they've got that catcher Smith, and they've got Taylor and Muncy and Outman, and Lux doesn't even get to play because they're so good. It's just a murderer's row. It really is. And every day, one of those star players, of which there are 4 or 5, right, has a great day. I mean, just every day, somebody has a great day, and that's the advantage of having stars, I guess, is that you can kind of bank on that. The Cubs hopefully will get to that point. Maybe Suzuki and Morel can be the beginnings of that. Maybe even Ian Happ, knock on wood. But the thought of the Cubs having like 5 guys who are kind of game changers in and of themselves, not just I'll go 2 for 4 with 2 singles, but like guys who are smashing home runs and bases loaded doubles. Oh, that's a tough lineup.
All right, Pat. I think with that we're gonna wrap it up. But before we do, we have our favorite segment here all season long. We will be talking about the 1984 Cubs, 40th anniversary of those 1984 Cubs, and I'm excited because I was very young in 1984, so they were not my team. The 84 Cubs, not my team. The 84 Cubs, I knew good things were happening because Cubs were on all the time. People were talking. I know Cubs were in the atmosphere, but I didn't appreciate it. 89 Cubs were my
right. The boys of Zimmer were your team. Yeah, my team was the 84 Cubs. That was my first favorite team, the first good Cubs team, really since 1972, let's be honest. So even since before any of us were really cognizant of the Cubs. But leaving that aside, the 84 team was a special team for me. On this day in 1984, do you know what the Cubs record was?
I don't. What was the Cubs record?
0-0, because back in the normal days, they didn't start playing in March. They waited until April. So tomorrow actually would be opening day for the Cubs. And we'll get into what happened then thereafter. I will just note that as someone who prided himself on having quite good attendance all throughout school, I did miss opening day 1984 due to a sudden cough.
Sure.
We're playing at San Francisco, playing the Giants, and Huey Lewis and the News sang the national anthem. That's when I knew the Cubs were big time.
That's big time there.
The opening day rotation, and this will make more sense in the coming weeks and months when we talk about this, but the opening rotation for the Cubs to start the 1984 season was, for the first series, was Dick Ruthven, Chuck Rainey, and Scott Sanderson. Not exactly the rotation they ended the year with, but
not quite. It seems like you could improve upon that.
Yeah, and improvements they did make. We talked last week quickly about how they obtained Bobby Dernier and Gary Matthews like March 27th, which was a great time to do it. And so they were improving the team, but I don't think anyone had great expectations going into the season that rotation Ruthven, Rainey, and Sanderson were the foundation of a 94 win team. You know, things improved as time went on. But yeah, we were sitting here anxiously awaiting the beginning of the season in 1984 on this day.
And I look forward to all of the 1984 history as we roll through this entire Cubs season. And then we'll continue to talk about all the exciting things hopefully the 2024 Cubs bring us every single week. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast as we hit our regular weekly cadence, free of charge, of course. Make sure you're subscribed anywhere podcasts are found. If you prefer the video version of the podcast, that's also now available up on our YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed there. Go to youtube.com, search for Wrigleyville Nation Podcast. You'll find us. We like likes and subscribes and all those things. Helps us work the algorithm so other Cub fans can find the show. We also rely on you to tell your Cub fan friends about the show. That's how we continue to spread the word. We rely on you. Cubs fans know other Cubs fans, so tell them about the show. Show them how to subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate it. And if you want to help keep the show ad-free, as this is another season where we're coming in not running ads. That is because of our Patreon over patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. If you go over there, you can support the show. Any dollar amount helps. Every single penny goes right back into this podcast. We pay for hosting fees and mic cables, whatever we need, all that stuff. Every single penny goes right back into the show. We've been able to cover all the expenses for the past few seasons. We want to keep that up. We do that because of our patrons over at patreon.com/.
Because I'm terrible at reading ad copy, but
and I hate hustle. I'm already trying to book guests. I can't be also trying to book advertisers too. Come on, we help us not have Pat read ad copy. Help me not try to book more advertisers and less guests. So
maybe you'll have to make up some fake 1984 ad copy for one of our episodes.
So we appreciate all the support from all of our listeners and looking forward to another great season. So with that, we're going to wrap it up and call it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.